does it take to be recognized as the best? To stand among the top in the nation. For the world-class team at Seattle Children's, it takes a certain competitive spirit, a desire to change the odds, and never, ever, ever give up. The prize for this relentless pursuit, giving every child a winning chance. Hope, Care, Cure. Seattle Children's. What does it take to be recognized as the best? To stand among the top in the nation. For the world-class team at Seattle Children's, it takes a certain competitive spirit, a desire to change the odds, and never, ever, ever give up. The prize for this relentless pursuit, giving every child a winning chance. Hope, Care, Cure. Seattle Children's. What does it take to be recognized as the best? To stand among the top in the nation. For the world-class team at Seattle Children's, it takes a certain competitive spirit, a desire to change the odds, and never, ever, ever give up. The prize for this relentless pursuit, giving every child a winning chance. Hope, Care, Cure. Seattle Children's.
Hello, my name is Laura Kastner, and I am your moderator for this season's Parent Ed Talk series. I'm a clinical psychologist and a clinical professor at the University of Washington in the psychiatry department. I'm the author of books on child development and parenting, and I have a practice in which I see children and couples and families. So on behalf of ParentMap, I'd like to welcome you. We are pleased to bring you what we hope is a transformative series of parent education webinars, offering you some expert advice for your children's healthy development. ParentMap is a woman-owned parenting media company based in Seattle. Its mission is to provide parents with valuable resources and foster inclusive and nurturing communities where families can thrive. Thank you for joining us today for our Parent Ed Talk, Harmony at Home, Successfully Navigating Parent-Child Differences, featuring Ann-Louise Lockhart. Before we start, please take a moment and tell us what city you're joining us from. And please, could you put it in the Zoom chat at the bottom of your screen? And now please welcome Dr. Lockhart. There she is. Hi,
Hello.
Ann-Louise.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Likewise for being here. So let's get started on parent-child differences, which are inevitable for many reasons. One reason, of course, is children are always learning and growing and exploring, pushing the envelope as they should for development. And parents are there to provide guidance and structure and boundaries so there can be a certain amount of difference and friction there. So please, could you address sort of the challenge of this and also why a lot of parents are not prepared for the enormity of this challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something that I hear a lot in my practice when I talk to parents, when I'm doing parent coaching, therapy, all the things. And I think many parents, myself included, when you become a parent, I think most parents have in their mind how parenting is going to be, or they don't think about how parenting is going to be. Like, just have a kid, like, how hard is it? Right. And so they have kids and they just expect that it's going to be a positive experience, or they want it to be maybe nothing like their childhood or just like their childhood, and any kind of range along that. So when it starts to become challenging and difficult, it's like, well, I didn't sign up for this. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it becomes more difficult, especially when the parent has a very different personality than their child,
Mm-hmm.
or when their child has a personality that you don't like as a
Mm-hmm.
parent. And that's hard for parents to admit. It's like, well, just because they're your child, just because you birthed them, adopted them, fostered them, doesn't mean that you're automatically just going to like them. They have their personality just like anybody else. And sometimes it'll rub you the wrong way.
Right. Well, that was really my next question, given what we both do for a living. There are so many challenging temperaments and personalities. And so could you talk about some of the most challenging temperaments and why they can be so stressful for children?
That's an interesting question because the temperaments that are challenging depends on the parent's temperament. Right? Because there are certain temperaments that people may love and that the same another person may despise. So,
Mm-hmm.
and there's different reasons. So I've seen parents and kids where, say, the parent is very extroverted,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have a very shy, introverted kid, and it
Mm-hmm.
annoys the parent. They're like, why are you so shy? Like, just
Mm-hmm.
talk. Why are you so clingy? Speak
Mm-hmm.
up. I can't hear you. Or the kid who's introverted gets very drained very quickly when they're in social situations and the parent is raring to go. So that can be challenging, not because being introverted is challenging, but it might be challenging for the parent who is not wired that way, and vice versa.
Right.
Parent who's very shy or quiet, introverted, prefers to be a homebody, has a kid who's just gets more energy with being around more people, then that can be draining for the parent because they're like, oh my gosh, you never stop. But
Mm-hmm.
I think based on that, so we know that yes, if you have a kid with a different personality, they can just be challenging simply because they don't match yours.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, the temperaments that I find that parents tend to have the hardest time with are kids who are more inflexible or
Mm-hmm.
sticky, as I call them,
Mm-hmm.
and where you said we can go to the park on Saturday. I know, sweetheart, but it's like lightning storm outside and we can't go. Yeah, but you promised. And these are
Right.
kids who are just so inflexible. They're rigid. They don't adapt. They're sticky and
Mm-hmm.
they get very wound up, and then you might see like a meltdown or a tantrum or slamming the doors because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Kids who are very strong-willed tend to also be very challenging as well because they catch you in parent loopholes and
Mm-hmm.
they think they're smarter than you,
Mm-hmm.
and they just tend to have a very kind of more uh, temperament that pushes back a lot on boundaries, on rules, questions everything. And for many parents, that feels rude and disrespectful. And in many ways, it can be. And so I
Hmm.
think to me, the inflexible kids and then the the kid who's just kind of more like tightly wound, those can be more challenging overall.
Hmm. Right. Well, you anticipated one of the questions from the audience, which was, I'm really, extroverted and my child's really introverted. What do I do with this? But we could say the same thing for children with ADHD, and parents are really linear and organized. And the hard thing about a lot of these kids is they look defiant, oppositional, and they're really responding to that temperament that makes it really hard to, shift gears and be the way the parent wants them to be. And then their behavior is interpreted a certain way.
Right. Well, and you bring up an interesting point too, because just because your kid's temperament is different doesn't just make that challenging. Maybe if their personality is too similar to yours and there's things
Right.
about yourself that annoy you, and then you see it in
Exactly.
your kid, right? Either because you don't want to address it in yourself, or it annoys you about yourself, or it causes challenging challenges for you. So I see this a lot because I treat a lot of kids with ADHD and anxiety. Parents who have ADHD themselves can
Exactly.
be challenged by their ADHD kid because now everybody is impulsive and everybody is dysregulated or disorganized. And it can cause more chaos because the parent is being the frontal lobe for trying to be for themselves and then
Right.
for their kid and everybody else. So, yeah,
Right.
too much of the same personality can also be a challenge too.
Right. They know how they've suffered, let's say, with ADHD, and they go, oh, no, 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 they're going to have
Yeah,
to go through the same thing. So you're right.
absolutely.
It's hard to see that recapitulation. Also, with depression, anxiety, when you see, I mean, this is getting off from temperament into other things, but you're almost going through grief and loss. Like they're going to go through what I went through. Oh, right. DNA is heritable, right?
Yeah. And then parents then want to fix it or
Right.
rescue them or shield them. And that's where we hear a lot of like the lawnmower, the helicopter, the snowplow parents, whatever
Right.
new term has come up, right?
Right.
Because essentially, as a parent, you want the best for your kid. And so you don't want them to suffer the way you did.
Hmm.
But then that can lead into perfectionistic parenting or
Hmm.
over parenting
Right.
because you don't want them to make the same mistakes you did, or you don't want them to get missed maybe the way you were.
Right.
Because many parents,
Right.
they're late diagnosed or people in their life didn't realize it. And so they try
Right.
too hard sometimes, and then that
Right.
can cause problems because now the kid feels like there's something to be fixed.
It's so true. We know that I know how I suffered. I see you suffering. I want to prevent suffering. Then that overparenting, but you're robbing them of an opportunity to learn and become competent with whatever that situation is. So it's really hard. The other point you made is that overcorrection, that sometimes whatever I had, that I didn't like, I so don't like, I want to go over here. And then they go 180 rather than darn it, they didn't stop at 90.
Right. And that's
Right.
why I tell parents that most of us, when we parent and we go into parenting, we want to be just like our parents or nothing like our parents or some
Right.
range. And I'm like, I get that and I understand that, especially if you had a childhood that you did not like or it was very harmful for you. But when we are creating our parenting identity based on what we got or didn't get, then we're not forming our own. We're just doing it based on what to do or what not to do. And
Right.
it's kind of like we're moving away or towards something. It's like, no, create your own identity. Take the pieces of your own childhood that you loved, take the pieces that you would rather leave behind, and then now you create your own, create your own. So
Right.
that way it's not always like, well, I don't want to do anything like that.
Right.
But start to create your own. And that can be hard. That can be very hard to
Yeah.
do.
And it takes a lot of thoughtfulness, which is why we have these webinars, right? Conscious
Exactly.
parenting means pick the best of what that was, leave the rest, create the new, collect information, have a community where you can get lots of new input. Yeah.
Right.
So the next topic, we all lose it sometimes. We can call losing it, flipping our lid, or emotional dysregulation. But kids push our buttons. It happens to all of us. So in your work with parents, what are some of the strategies that you teach parents for cooling off so that they can be effective?
Yeah, that's a good one because that involves co-regulation because
Hmm.
we talk a lot about keeping the calm for a kid, but if your nervous system is triggered, it's really hard to do that. So, for example, I had read and I discovered this when I saw this movie, this really weird movie a few years ago. And the movie started out by this very large egg in a nest of very small eggs. And I was like, okay, what's going on? So anyway, time passes and these little baby birds hatch, and then this very large baby bird hatches. And so there's this big, large bird in the midst of these small birds. And then this small little mama bird comes and is obviously the mama to the small ones, but not to the big one. And she's feeding it, feeding it, feeding it. And then I see the little baby bird pushes the little other birds out of the nest, like essentially like terminating their life. And I'm like, okay, what the heck is happening? So I had to look it up. And what it is, I don't remember if it's a cuckoo bird or mockingbird. I don't remember what the species is, but there's a species of bird that lays eggs in other birds' nests and doesn't take care of their own bird. Because then when this bird hatches, it peeps and peeps and peeps so much, other birds are annoyed by the noise and end up feeding and taking care of this bird. Okay, so why do I share this? Because even in the animal kingdom, they're annoyed by the whining and the squawking and the all these different noise because it's irritating. It's irritating to our system. And so when we as adults hear our kid whining, complaining, slamming doors, stomping, it is aggravating and triggering for our nervous system. And we become dysregulated. Our heart is rate increases, our blood pressure increases, we feel confused, we get brain fog, we shut down, we yell, we whatever. And so basically our nervous system is dysregulated. And if we understand that, we have to know that it's normal. It's normal to feel that. Kids do it because it works. They whine, they yell, they tantrum because it works on some level. So we have to start not by correcting our kids' behavior. We have to start by regulating ourselves first. That is the hardest but most important step. You don't correct it. You in the moment, not yet. You have to regulate yourself first because then you're going to react in a way that you're going to regret and then repeat the cycles that you tried to move away from. So the biggest part is to do the co-regulation piece, which is taking a breath first to regulate physically and physiologically your nervous system. And then you tell yourself the truth. All right, 2-year-olds are supposed to whine and nag. That is actually very common. And 70 to 75% of 2 to 4-year-olds have tantrums. My child is developing typically. Thank goodness for that. Now, this stuff is still really annoying, and I'm okay. It's okay to feel annoyed. It will pass. It will not go on forever. So I think we have to do the physiological, physical kind of regulation of ourselves, and then we have to give ourselves the message of what is actually true, that you can handle this and it won't go on forever and it will end.
Right. I think it took me a long time to realize one of the most important first variables in parenting with self-regulation and co-regulation is self-awareness, being aware of the body. My voice is going up. I'm aware of here you go again. I'm aware of my heart rate going up so that you can even know that you need to take the breath and then have that conversation. It's like body awareness of biology, noticing your state and then starting to do deep breathing so you can get that heart rate down. By the way, right as we were talking, and Louise, somebody, Jen was her name, said that bird is a brown-headed cowbird. Now even you learned something this morning from our
brown-headed
really smart
cowbird. Thank you, Jen.
Yes, exactly. So forever and a day, a lot of one of the most simplistic things to say about parenting is it's love and limits. And yet in the heat of the moment, in certain situations, people feel like they need to choose between authority and loving connection. And some situations are obviously straightforward. If it's a toddler running in the street, limit, just pull that little diaper right back. But of course, most of parenting is much more nuanced. So again, how do you help support parents communicating, caring for the child's emotions while still maintaining boundaries? And some examples would be great. Like you could even make one up from your own practice or coaching.
Yes, yes. So we have to give our kids love and limits. We can't just love them and let them do whatever. That's permissive. We can't just provide limits and no love because that could be very authoritarian. So there is a balance of being able to provide both. Now, the challenge is when we are in an emotionally dysregulated state, which is why the co-regulation piece is so important, we're not going to think clearly and provide logical limits because we're all out of whack. And our brain, when it's processing emotions and feeling dysregulated, it's not going to think very clearly. Logic is going to take a back burner. So we have to provide options. So let me give you an example. Several years ago, I have a 12-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. And several years ago, my son was early elementary school, and he was having a challenge with telling time on analog clocks. And he was in the after school program, and he had a homework assignment, and it was about clocks. And when I was looking at it after I picked him up, all of it was correct. And I'm like, this is statistically impossible, because I know that he has a challenge with this. So I was like, oh, you finished your homework in after school? Yes. Did someone help you? No. And he just looked shifty and shady. And I was like, this boy is not telling the truth. And I said, did someone help you, or did you copy off of someone's work? And he was like, and I said, it sounds like you copied off of someone's work. And he said, yeah. And I said, that makes sense to me. You cheated. I used to cheat too. And he's like, Mom. And I was like, yeah, because it's easy. When you follow, you don't cheat off of someone else's work and you take a shortcut, it's super easy because now the work is done, right? I said, but what's the problem though? He's like, I still don't know how to tell time. And I was like, right, you still don't know how to tell time. So what we're going to do is we're going to erase all the answers, and we're going to go through each step, and we're going to find creative ways for you to get shortcuts that make sense, that are actually part of for you to help better understand time. And I remember sharing this years ago, and people were like, well, did you, take away TV and punish him? And I was like, and what would that have done? Right. So maybe you see that's a limit. That's not a limit. You're just making stuff up because to deal with your own parental anger and frustration. Does that make sense? Yeah, it could make sense. But then the child isn't learning anything. What I want to do is, if I'm going to provide discipline, I want him to learn out of the discipline. I also want him to be honest with me in the future, so that he understands that mom is going to get it, that he doesn't have to hide and be secretive, and that the punishment, the consequence, is she is understanding and patient and walks me through the thing that actually was holding me back. And because of that, he even told me, and his sister told me yesterday, he got a bad grade on a test. And I was like, oh, well, that sucks. And he's like, yeah, I just really didn't understand the information. And I said, okay, well, let's see how you can study differently next time. And he's like, okay. And he's like, wow, you really do not overreact like a lot of my friends' parents when we do poorly in school. And I'm like, because why? Like, what's the use in overreacting? I want to be curious about the flaw or the failure, potential failure, because did you not study correctly? Was the test not done well? Did you not ask the right questions of the teacher to prepare? Like, there are other reasons. So I always tell parents to get curious. When you see behavior that seems unacceptable to you, you have to get curious first, because then what you're going to do is, if you're always overreacting or reacting, maybe even intentionally, for a situation that justifies it, you're going to get a kid who withdraws, gets sneaky, is going to lie. And then comes to really important stuff, they're not going to go to you, because they're going to know, like, oh, she's going to be tripping, so I'm just not going to say anything.
So your response, I think, illustrated three things that I'd like to highlight. One, because one of the parents came in and said, well, that would never work with my kid, that you could be. Well, I say, well, first of all, Ann-Louise, you clearly have a history with your child. Even your child said, my parents, I know of other parents that are overreactive. There's a history of your being understanding at the time. You also showed validation, which is, I get it from your point of view, cheating happens. It's really nice to get away from the bad feeling of vulnerability of not knowing or making a bad grade. So that's a quick way of doing it. So you validated, you understood why they did it. And then you could follow it with, okay, what's a natural consequence? How do we learn from this, right? Not a punishment to make you have pain, but some way. So there are three things in there that really, because I find that parents really struggle with the concept of validation, that, the idea that you can communicate empathy and understanding without necessarily approving or agreeing with the way that child behaved or expressed emotions. So you want to talk a little bit more about how you foster that respect and understanding, even when the parent fundamentally disagrees with what they did.
Yes. And I think that's a great point, Laura, because validation doesn't mean, oh, I agree. I'm glad that you cheated. That's not what validation is. Validation is saying you make sense. What you did makes sense. I understand why you did it. I don't want to go through the pain of having to figure out how to do this thing. So I'm going to take a shortcut. That makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. Do I agree with it? No, but I understand why. And I think
Mhm.
we have to get off of our high horse as parents. And I see this a lot with adults in administration, with people in power, that they forget what it's like to be a kid sometimes. Like, remember what it was like when you're learning something for the first time and the frustration that you get when you cannot get it, when your brain is not kicking into gear and you feel judged by that. And so
Mhm.
I think we really have to go through the process of being able to understand our kid and being able to establish that connection and that collaboration to be
Mhm.
curious. And so I think
Mhm.
that curiosity is important. And that
Mhm.
validation is really showing, like, I get it, it makes sense, so that we can move away from the punishment piece. So
Mhm.
what's the last part that you'd asked, Laura? I want to make sure I
Oh,
answer that.
just that, that how you basically can convey all that. And, one of the little slogans we have a lot, it's been in everywhere in our training, and I love to share it with parents, is try to connect before correcting, right?
Yes.
Just have it in your mind. I'm going to connect, be curious, understand where they're coming from. I can always set a limit later if it's not that instantaneous moment kind of thing. As one of my supervisors told me a million years ago, Laura, there are very few emergencies. Pulling the toddler out of the street is an emergency, but many things that happen, like what your vignette showed, is it's a situation. You don't
Mhm.
need to move to the punishment or the penalty, for what they do. You can connect and try to understand first. So I think you really
Absolutely.
covered
And I
it.
love that. I say that all the time. And I also tell parents, don't stop fighting fake battles.
Yeah,
Like, so often they think, and my husband and I have had this conversation. He's like, well, what if we don't correct this behavior now, then they'll never learn. I'm like, that's not true.
right,
It's
right,
not true that they'll never learn. But if we try to correct it when we are really at the height of frustration, like
right.
yesterday was a really intense day for me. I had some doozies of client situations and I just was spent. So my patience level was not where it should be when I got home. So there were things that my kids did that I could have corrected and I chose not to in the moment because I was dysregulated already. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't mean that they're not going to learn. So when I was a little bit calmer, then I could address it. But when we fight these fake battles, we're addressing things that sometimes don't need to be addressed,
Right,
or we're paying attention to the wrong thing. And so that connection is so important because again, then your kid will come to you for things that actually matter rather than being quiet and sneaky about it. That
right,
relationship is key. It's
right.
really key.
Well, and the other key thing is you took your own emotional temperature first to know I'm just going to back up right now because I'm not at my best to deal with it. Now, let's keep going on the difficult conversations. And let's say people are regulated, but they still are wondering, how do I broach a tough situation? One of the parents just chimed in with, what about battles over a cell phone? So what about, you want to have a conversation about they've been rude with in front of your friends or their friends because they show off. They've been, not exactly compliant with cell phone use. You're afraid they're going to be defensive. You're bringing up, sliding grades, or they're really aggressive with their sibling. All of these are really tough situations where the kid is likely to be pretty defensive, but you want to talk to them. You want to give some tips on those hard situations.
Of course. Really, the bottom line, because I don't want parents to feel like they have to do more to parent effectively, because it's just, there's too much information out there. And
Right.
so I always tell people do less. And why I say that is because I believe the default in all those situations, screen time battles, bedtime, eating brownies before dinner, whatever it is, always go back to the default, which is mine, personally and professionally, is to get curious first. Get
Mhm.
curious first. When they are violating some rule or doing something that you find offensive, annoying, whatever it is, get curious first about why they're doing it.
Mhm.
Be Try to find the thing, the root cause of what's driving the behavior. So I'll give an example with the screen time. About 3 weeks ago, my daughter was supposed to be in bed. She's 14. She had gone to bed after studying really late. It was about 9:45. And I have my kids keep their phones in their bed because I have an app that locks and stops it. She found a loophole that although she can't get into her phone, friends can still call. And so now she can be on the phone. Okay. And so I heard her on the phone and I was like, I came in and I'm like, are you on the phone? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, it's bedtime. You don't need to be on the phone. So I took the phone. Now, taking the phone is not my go-to automatically. Okay. But I took it that night. But because I didn't want to fight a fake battle because I was very frustrated. Like, are you serious? So the next day I told her, I want you to know that you don't need to be secretive about this kinds of stuff. Tell me why you were on your phone afterwards. And so she had disclosed some things that she was struggling with, and a friend was helping her with the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And that she needed some connection in that moment, some peer connection. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense to me. So in the future, I said, when I was your age, I was a very sneaky kid. And it ruined my relationship with my mom at the time. I don't want that for you, and I don't want that for us. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you need more time because you want to talk to a friend for support, just let me know and I'll give you more time. It's not a big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
And so again, it would have been easy to say you're grounded from your phone for a week, but then I wouldn't have gotten to the root of what was driving the behavior. And I think that's why it's so important to have that relationship and that connection with your kid. Connect before you correct. Because if you don't get curious about why the behavior occurred, then you don't really understand what it is.
Right.
So then you'll take the phone and then the need hasn't been met for the child. And then when they get the phone back, they're going to do the same behavior, but they'll get smarter with it.
Mhm. What if she had said, gee, I'm glad you asked. I really think I can manage this. I think I should have my phone in bed. That's what I want you to understand about me. I think I can self-manage. I want my phone to be in bed with me and I can
So
use it.
what I've told her is, I think we're
Mhm.
going on 2 weeks now. I said, well, it seems like you're not able to manage it because she'd said something similar. So I'm going to keep your phone. You're going to check it in at night. And when you're done with your homework and talking with your friends, if you need more time, you let me know. But this is the drop dead
Sure.
kind of end time. And I'm going to hold it for you and I will charge it for you and it'll stay in my hotel.
Great, great. So I'm so glad I asked because people might say that because always going to give a good reason and it's kumbaya. But sometimes you go, oh, gee whiz, it's just too
Right,
compelling. Most adults
right.
can't handle perfect self-control either. I'm going to make it easier for you. Take it to the
Right. It's
hotel.
too tempting for right now, and
Yeah,
she hasn't fought me on it. Every night she's like,
great.
"Can I have more time?" If she needs it, I'm like, "Sure." And then she'll bring it and she's like, "Here you go." It's like, "Thank you very much. I'll charge it for you." And that's it. We've been going on 2 weeks now. So it's like she just couldn't do it. And
She
she
probably
just
kind of
got,
knows, Anna, right? Don't you think,
she
Ann-Louise, that
knows.
she kind of knows
Yeah.
it's easier for her too? Well,
Yep.
let's dive more into the adolescence, and I have two really good questions coming up. So to frame it up, we know that there's bound to be more moods, there's going to be more argumentativeness, more risk-taking, because they're exploring. That's what they're supposed to do with their new identities. Different interests, their unique identity means different interests, different values, and potentially more friction. And often their interests and values with the parents don't sync up. So I want to give you I'll give you the first question. How can parents connect when their children's interests are drastically different from the parents? What do you do when you have absolutely no interest or knowledge in what they're into? For instance, gaming.
Yes, great question. And I had some notes on that because I get that question a lot too. I think one of the things is to well, first of all, I get it because some of the stuff that they like, I'm like, oh my gosh. I even had a parent group ask me about like their little kids who want to play make believe grocery shopping. And they're like, girl, I grocery shop for real. I don't want to do it for fake. So there's all different kinds of things, whether you're not like a play person or whether they're interested in something that you just will do not like K-pop or Minecraft or sports or whatever it is. And so our kids aren't here to entertain us. That's the truth. They're not here to entertain us. We're not here to entertain them either. And their interests are theirs. You don't have to like K-pop and Minecraft and Roblox. You don't have to like those things, but you can still respect their passion. And so a simple thing that you can do is I love how excited, or that you could say, I love how excited you get about this. Tell me more. And so
Mhm.
you don't have to be involved fully, but just like when you love someone, when someone loves you, they love it because you love it.
Mhm.
And so you don't have to just be all gung ho about it and doing research about all the latest K-pop artists
Mhm.
to support their passions, but have them educate you on it. Sit with them as they do it, even if it's mind-numbingly boring. Okay, so tell me about Minecraft. Tell me how you've created this world. Because what it'll do is it'll give you a bird's eye view into your kid maybe their creativity, that they're very tech savvy, that
Mhm.
they've figured that they take good self-initiation, they have good impulse control. And it'll
Mhm.
also give you insight into maybe why it's hard for them to turn off their device. Because
Mhm.
on some of these games or some of these platforms or some of these hobbies, you can't just shut it off. You can't just stop it because they get so involved in it. And so I think
Right.
it's about understanding and being in their world. And I remember a few years ago, my kids were watching Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? And I remember this show because I used to watch it in the 80s when I was a kid. And so, they kind of revamped it. And they kept, when we would tell them, okay, kids, it's now time to turn off the TV. And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, what is the big deal? So I said, okay, I'm going to watch a show, an episode with you. So I start watching it with my husband and the kids. And I'm like, and it ends. And I was
So
like, oh, let's
good.
watch one more.
Uh-huh.
Because it always ends on a cliffhanger. And I'm like, that's why they don't want to end it, because it's like this to be continued. So you don't want to end it because you're like, what happens next? So we end up watching 3 more episodes until they said, Mom, it's time to turn it off and go to sleep now.
Right,
But it
right.
helped me to better understand why they liked it. And I ended up liking it as well, too.
Right. Well, 2 points there. One, first of all, I find when you do this too, if you're really open, it's surprising how much we can learn from them and
Yeah.
we learn cool things. Like those new top of the charts K-pop girls. Oh my goodness, talk about just to use an example.
Right.
Wow, I'm not poppy myself, but they are awesome. Okay. So we can learn. The other thing is that it's an opportunity for we're getting into media again, but for what we call media literacy is why do the advertisers and makers of this stuff who all want our eyeballs end with cliffhangers? How do you like feeling manipulated? That's a whole other thing. But had to make the point about media
Mhm.
literacy because there's so much that we need to teach and learn about being manipulated, you know?
Yes.
So, but
And you're going to have discussions with them, but it also gives you an idea about why transitioning might be hard for them.
yes,
It gives you an
exactly.
understanding of their personality. I've learned so much about my kids based on the things that they enjoy, or even
Right,
like an artist or music that they listen to and why they like this person.
right,
So I really
right,
think that it gives you an opportunity to really get into your kids' world. And when they see that you take a genuine interest in them because of the things that they're interested in,
right,
it forms
right.
more of a connection with you.
Right.
And there's
Well,
less
you're on the same
combativeness.
team too. Like when you
Exactly.
were, even if you're looking at the cliffhanger piece of the and the media literacy piece, you're together going, huh, with your Socratic method. I wonder how this works. I wonder how more eyeballs they get. And then you're together looking at a whole other situation, not just the
Mhm.
wonderfulness of Carmen Maria. But here's the next question from a parent. So this mom describes herself as being straight A's and lots of after school sports and activities and loving schools, and her son does not. So she says, I'm trying to let him have the space to figure out his own path, but I'm struggling to balance that with not having high expectations for him. When do I let him fail and learn from experience, and when do I provide structure for him?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. That is so hard. And again, that goes back to parent personalities are
Yeah,
so different from their
yeah,
kids,
yeah,
right? Because if your personality was very organized or type A or very academic, very motivated, very involved, very social, and your kid is like, I didn't sign up for any of that stuff, it can feel like you failed. And I think
right.
we have to address the real issue is that for a lot of parents, that feels like a failure. What did I
Mm,
do wrong that my kid isn't academic like
mhm,
I was, or
mhm,
that they're not as social as I was, or they don't have as many friends as I did? And it can
mhm,
feel like a failure. So I think we first have to be honest with ourselves about why does it bother you so much that they aren't operating the way you did?
mhm,
And then I think we have to be, so it's a little bit of tough love there. And I think we also have to be honest about, like, is it important that they prioritize these things? And the answer might be, well, yeah, they can't be flunking out of school. But the thing is, again, then get curious. Why is school hard? Why is getting good grades difficult?
mhm,
Why is not being involved in extracurricular not a priority for them? Get curious about that, because for some kids, it might be self-esteem, that
mhm,
maybe they don't want to be part of the swim team because they're self-conscious about their body, or they don't want
mhm,
to be in the gymnastics team because there's a bunch of kids on there that bully them in
mhm,
school, or
mhm,
they feel stupid, or they feel like they're not good enough. Like there's a lot of reasons that drive that behavior. And I think if we can
mhm,
get curious about that, then it can maybe bother you less in the way that you
mhm.
think it is.
Mhm.
And having that connection and that conversation with your child, I think, is super, super important. So I
Yeah.
think we have to first be honest with ourselves about, like, why is it bother me so much? Why is it so important? And then get curious and then validate it. Again, go back to that with our kid. Well, that makes sense that you don't want to do blank.
Mhm. Mhm.
It makes sense because I didn't have that challenged. I didn't have
Mhm.
that challenge the way you did. And I get why you don't want to do that. How can we come up with a solution together? So then you engage in some of that collaborative problem solving with them that Dr. Ross Green talks about in his Explosive Child book. And I love collaborative problem solving because it really is like there is a problem here. You're not the problem, but there is a problem here, and problems have solutions usually.
Mhm.
How can we come up with a solution together so that you do feel engaged or active, or you can bring up
Mhm.
your grades or why grades matter, any of those kinds of
Mhm.
things. So I
Mhm.
think we have to normalize it, but we have to get curious and we have to problem solve along with them. Not, well,
Oh.
what you need to do
Mhm.
is, because that's going to get pushback. You have to do
Yeah.
it together with them. So it
Yeah.
feels like it's their idea.
Exactly. Here's one of the other things that happens with adolescents, of course, back with those moods and the brain changes and so forth. And they're struggling to get their place in the sun separate from us, is they can be negative most of the time. And that can be perfectly normal, that it's not inevitable, it's not universal, but it's more likely than not that they bring in a lot of negativity. So the challenge for the parent is, how does a parent stay mostly positive? Because that's our religion of parenting. We're going to be influential and have some credibility. We have to be mostly positive and not a tyrant. How do we stay mostly positive when they're mostly negative? And then so that's my big overarching question, and appreciation for the audience. And then there's a specific question from a parent: how should I respond to eye rolling and other verbal resistance, like, "Oh my God, mom"?
Yeah, I totally get it. I experienced that yesterday with a client, and it took a lot of self-control because it was doing a lot of triggering. So, so I totally get it. Okay. So how I conceptualize or see negativity in a teen, well, there's a lot of reasons for it, right? But it's can be often a defense mechanism in some way. And when I meet with teens, and I ask them about their behavior, many times they know their parent has a view or an idea about why they're doing it. They did, like, they don't respect me, or they're just being difficult, or they're being hormonal, whatever it is. And maybe they're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe they're feeling anxious. Maybe they're not feeling good enough, or they don't understand their place in the world. And so we don't need to pretend that we like the eye rolling or
Mhm.
that the stomping and the rude, snarky, "You're so cringe, mom." Like, we don't have to be like, "Oh, I love that my teen is like this." Like, we don't have to do that. But we have to acknowledge the feeling. And what I believe in doing is kind of like describing the behavior without judgment. So I see that you came in the door after school and you threw down your backpack and you, like, let out a big sigh. And when I asked you if you're okay, you rolled your eyes. Like, just stating it, not in a sarcastic way, not in an attitudey way, not in, "Oh, I love that you give me such attitude." Like, we're not faking it, right? It sounds like your day was really tough. Do you want to vent, or do you want some solutions? Oh, I hear what you're saying. I get what that's why it's frustrating. "Hey, I noticed that you rolled your eyes when I asked about your homework." "I didn't roll my eyes." I noticed that you did." And other times, you may not even need to address the eye rolling again. Don't fight fake battles. Like, you don't have to address every time a teen does something, because I
Right.
think we need to know about teens is they have very poor self-awareness.
Right.
Really poor. Self-awareness is an executive function skill that is one of the last to develop and to be made known to their brain. Self-monitoring and self-awareness. That
Mhm.
means when you have a tone, or you roll your eyes, or you cop an attitude, that is to be able to know that you do that. That requires self-awareness, and they
Mhm.
suck at that. They're
Right.
terrible at that.
Right.
And so when you're addressing something that they don't have any idea from on a brain level, and then now you're yelling and punishing them for it, then again, you're just shutting
Right.
them down and you're not getting to the real issue. And they're
Right.
not going to talk to you about the real issue.
Right.
So I think we have to understand, don't fight certain battles because they're not worth it. And then once things are calm, then you can address it.
Yeah.
When they feel like they've been heard, or when they feel now like an hour later and they're more chill, and then you're joking over ice cream, you can say, "Hey, I noticed when you first came home from school, it seemed like you were really having a rough time. And I noticed a lot of the eye rolling and huffing and puffing. Do you notice that you do that?" Then you can bring it up. But I think when you're both at the height of frustration, it's not the time to bring
Right.
up a lot of that stuff. And it's not the time to correct it, honestly.
I want to underline another one of the things you made a minute ago, points you made, which is sometimes if it's real benign, just like, oh, I'm home and I'm just stretching my, we don't have to do anything. I mean, one way to keep the ratio of positivity up is not go after every little thing, especially if it's my potentially really benign. So one way we do that is just pick and choose. Is this relevant? And that goes into a couple of questions that came in, which is parents that said when they get curious, their kids are really annoyed and actually close down. So the one parent said, how can I change it up and maybe not use that word or come off a little different than I want to bond and excavate what's going on right now, because they've already developed a little scar tissue on that one.
Yeah. Yes. So I think, first of all, I want to say, I want us as parents not to take these behaviors personally. It's very easy to see a kid cop an attitude and think that it's about us. And I think we have to be very careful about doing that. And I hear teenagers tell me this all the time in therapy. I hate it when my parent thinks my depression, my anxiety, my frustration, my rude behavior is about them. That sometimes it's because of me, because of the rough day that I had.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
about you, right? So I think we want to make sure we don't take it personally. The other thing too is that, yes, I agree, we do have to change up our language, because I think parents, we've become so educated on parenting that we sound like parents, and
Mhm.
kids can pick
Mhm.
up on it. Like, what have you been watching?
Mhm.
And so we do have to mix it up. We have to use language that feels authentic to you, and
Mhm.
that feels authentic for them based on their personality style. I use a lot of humor with my kids. I just naturally find lots of things funny. And so even when something feels rude, like I remember one time when my son had said something rude to my husband, and I came up to him and I shoulder bumped him. And he's like, "What'd you do that for?" And I was like, "Because that's how we used to fight in the 80s. Like, that's how you gonna talk to my husband?" And he's like, "What you doing? Don't talk to my husband like that." And so he started giggling. And then I'm like, "You really shouldn't talk to your dad like that." He's like, "I know. I'm sorry, Dad." But I kind of broke the mood. I don't do this all the
Right.
time. This doesn't happen all the time. But to change it up a little bit, like, you don't have to do it like, "I noticed that you're very rude to your father. Like, that's not
Yeah.
how we
Yeah.
speak in our household. I hear that you're frustrated, but let's be gentle." Like, that can feel fake. And the other thing that I tell parents a lot is, the reason why a lot of times our teens and kids shut down with some of the things that we do and how we talk to them is because it doesn't make sense. Like, if your kid is kicking the back of your seat because they're frustrated that you didn't stop at McDonald's, or they cussed you out and called you a name, or embarrassed you in front of your friends, and you're just like, "Well, all the research says that I need to be really gentle and conscious and attachment based." So I'm just like, "Oh, you are having strong feelings. I don't like it when you kick the back of my seat." Like,
Exactly.
that doesn't make any sense.
It's not
If someone
authentic
is
either.
It doesn't feel authentic. If someone is being rude and hurtful and actually hurt you physically or emotionally,
Yeah.
and you're super calm, that doesn't make any sense to them. That feels very inauthentic and it feels fake. So
Mhm.
it's okay to match the energy, but in a way that's controlled.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
do not kick the back of my seat. That is hurting me, and it actually can be very dangerous. Please stop now.
Right.
And so then you're just being very firm, you're being very direct, you're setting the limits, but you're having an authentic reaction without losing control.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think sometimes with the gentle parenting movement and the attachment, all these words put like this thing on it, like if I'm really, really, really nice, then I'll have less of that friction. And you're going, developmentally, they need to explore, spread their wings, go through adolescence. We're not trying to eradicate all negative emotion here, right?
No, we're not.
But I think sometimes parents, back to what you said at the beginning, really are not ready for the acrimony. Your title of your talk is harmony, but we also need to be ready for acrimony. It's just part of the differences and going through a hard life and having the scrapes and difficulties that they have, and they're going to have these little emissions of hitting the back of your chair, and you can say, cut it out, that's dangerous. And the
Mhm.
beauty of staying benign and funny and creative, as you've been remarking, is it leaves you room for that strong rebuke that you need to do every now and then. Cut it out, right? You don't
Right.
do that all the time. We can already tell
No.
from your personality you don't. You've earned that, and it matters because you're mostly not like that. You save
Right.
it for when it really matters, you know.
Right.
Um,
Well, and the thing is, I want to bring up as well too is I saw this post. I don't remember where it was, but it was like these comments that teenagers made who were difficult, and when they kind of came out of that, some of the things that they wanted their parents to know. And one of the ones that stood out the most, and I love this because I hear it so much with kids that I've seen, because I see lots of kids over the years, kind of as they come and come back and leave and come back when they get better and they get worse. And one of the things that I always hear and what this post had said is, we always come back.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think we want to remember that you can set such a good foundation for your kids and they still screw up. And you
right,
feel like you're failing and you're not doing anything right. And you can do everything right and you're still your kid makes poor decisions. But if you have a good foundation, they will come back. And I think we want to
absolutely.
remember that it's not about a parent failure if they're making poor choices or they have to go to alternative school or they have to go to the hospital. Like it doesn't mean that you failed because our kids have their own personality. They're
Right,
independent, they're autonomous, and they will sometimes make poor decisions even when
mhm,
you do everything right. So
right,
I think we
right,
need to remember that. We need to remember
right,
that they will come back and that you can it's about good enough parenting. It's not about being a
right,
perfect
right,
parent. It's about
right.
being good enough.
Well, and developmentally, as we know, it can get a little rough around 11 with puberty and 13 because of brain changes.
Absolutely.
But you were talking about how they have self-awareness later. And what we know from research, and this goes back to literally 1940s with, you know, those Jean Piaget and all those guys, that they come back around, this is like, you know, 80% of the time around 17 or 18, junior and
Yep.
senior year. When I give talks, I'll say, raise your hand if you kind of notice they're a little nicer at, you know, end of junior year or something, and the hands go up, and the parents of the middle schooler say there is a day when they'll come back. So developmentally, it's kind of, you know, built in, but once they go through a certain amount of this solidification of their brain and personhood, 11 to 16, that's a long time
It's a
of building a
long time
self, and
and
they
it's
really can become
painful.
quite humane at 17 and 18. It's just shocking. Um,
Yes.
Okay, now let's go into another area that's really challenging for parents, and that's when they don't agree. And when, you know, I always say that even when you're pretty aligned, if you have enough things that are anxiety provoking, you can get you know, small differences polarized. But this is one of those situations with a divorced parent where it's more exaggerated. So here's her question. My 7-year-old son is in a split household. His dad has no rules. He is sloppy and late to work, etc. My son now prefers him because he gets all the TV he wants and no need to do well at school. My son used to be really good when I was the main caregiver. His parent has just been involved since last October. What should I do so that my son grows up to be respectful, motivated, and hardworking despite his father's negative influence?
Ooh, wow, that's a hard one. It's a hard one. So because what you hope to accomplish is co-parenting. I just spoke on the local news about this last week. Because first of all, it's tough, and I'm really sorry that you're going through that. When whoever is going through that, I think it can be really tough because what we know about kids and people in general, but especially children, is that they thrive off of consistency. So when one parent has structure and the other doesn't, it can be very confusing. And it can feel like sometimes the parents get pitted against one another, or a child might choose to be with one versus the other because they get to do whatever they want. But here's the thing. You can't control what happens at their dad's house. You can only focus on your home. And it's not going to benefit you or your child to badmouth the dad. So please try to stay away from that because you don't want to create this resentment, especially with boys and their dads. Many times they will side with dad. They come back to moms later, especially if they have this resentment. So I think first thing is to really acknowledge the frustration. You know, maybe saying something like, I know that it's different at dad's, and that can be hard. Then you stick to your rules with kindness and clarity. You know, in our house, we clean up our toys before bed, or the phone gets sent to mom, stays with mom, whatever it is. And then mostly, like I said, don't bash the other parent. So even if it's frustrating, saying something like, well, the dad will let you do whatever you want. You know, that's why I divorced him, good for nothing. Like we want to stay away from that because it puts the kid in the middle and instead focus on your home. So
Mhm.
different houses have different rules, and that's okay. here, this is how we do things. When you're with your dad, that's the way he does things.
Mhm.
And so when it comes down to it, you cannot control that. And trying to force it is not going to make it easier. It's going to actually make it harder. And the key is to make your home a place where there's more connection and not just rules. And so if they resist the structure, it's okay. Because kids will often do that because they see the inconsistency. But if he knows what to expect, and you stay consistent and you reinforce the idea that different houses have different rules, and it's about connection and not control, then you can help him go through it so that way he can adapt. I've done the same thing when I've supervised students or residents when they're like, yeah, every supervisor wants me to write the report differently. Yeah, yeah. So then you just learn to write your report differently. You learn how to do your essays differently. Like we learn to adapt. And so
Mhm.
that can be a
Mhm.
really great way to teach your child how to be flexible, how to be adaptable. When
Mhm.
you're with your dad, this is what happens. When you're with mom, this is what happens. You are
Mhm.
so adaptable. Proud of you,
Mhm.
buddy.
Well, and this parent has to believe that in the end, because kids do thrive with limits and love, to accentuate one of your points, as long as she's loving and kind while she has the limits, this is the kind of kid that might take a while, but all goodies at the other house, they start to know that's not good for them. They certainly like it and might want to prioritize it. But the only thing that will make that son want to live with that father is if mom is not messaging some of the things that you said, with if she's lower on the loving kindness along with the structure, she's going to push him to his father, right? Not just the
Yep.
goodies. So I think
Right.
that's a really important point. We had another question come in that we hear a lot as psychologists, and that is that her child is perfectionistic. And she says, how do I work with my child so that they can accept their own mistakes?
Yes. So I think with perfectionistic kids, that can be a challenge, especially if a parent also is challenged by that. But many times what I find is that perfection is about fear or anxiety.
Hmm.
Perfectionism
Yep.
and anxiety tend to be besties.
Hmm.
And because it's really about the fear of failure
Right.
and of not being good enough. And I have to, and it honestly, it's the reason why a lot of kids have messy rooms,
Hmm.
because if I can't make my room perfect, if it can't be exactly, then I just will forget it. And I noticed this when I used to watch the show Hoarders, which I cannot watch anymore. But it's that same idea where a lot of things felt out of control, and that's why things got so out of control in a very extreme way. So I think it's really about model making mistakes. Like, oop, I messed
Yep.
up, no big deal. Or I meant to do this, and oh, the recipe didn't come out right. Oh, I guess, well, we just start all over again. With mistakes, we learn our lessons. I think it's also about praising the effort and not the outcome. That's why I don't make a big deal about grades. I was a horrible student in high school. My kids know that. And I'm a doctor with two
Mhm.
masters and a doctorate and a bachelor. So like the effort, it's not about the outcome, it's about the effort. And so if you tried your best, or even if you didn't try your best, but you thought about trying your best next time, that's still movement. So we're looking at, I love how hard you worked on that. I love how you remembered that you will work hard next time, that now you've learned a lesson.
Mhm.
We can always look at some movement towards the eventual goal, and then remind them that done is better than perfect. So if they do
Mhm.
something and it doesn't come out quite right, then done is better than perfect. And we have to look at the environment, that maybe there's something in the environment that's causing them the overwhelm where they're shutting
Mhm.
down. Maybe they have too
Mhm.
much stuff in their room or too many clothes or whatever it is, too many decisions that they have to make. And so
Right.
always go back to teaching them that perfection is about fear, and educate your kid. I find
Mhm.
kids respond really well to education when they can understand why they are the way they are, and that it's not because there's something wrong with them or that they're flawed, but there's something that's driving their
Right.
behavior. Again, always go
Right.
back to what's driving the behavior.
Right.
And if they can understand that about themselves, they can accept
Right.
themselves rather than judge themselves.
Right. The other thing we probably need to say as psychologists, that when it's extreme, because it is about anxiety and fear of failure,
Yes.
even when they do understand, they need to practice being imperfect. So a lot of the therapy we do, of course, is have them make mistakes and live with it and have that anxiety go up and then go down. It doesn't have to be on school, but we have them like do things that make them embarrassed and live through it. Like go to the pizza place and ask for, some spring rolls, or go to the Korean restaurant and ask for some barbecue. So they need to practice that feeling of feeling less than perfect, whatever it is, or what they do in a essay and misspelling things. We literally have them practice that so they can have the feeling and work through it. Because I mean, even if they know it's fear of failure, they still need to embody it, the
Right.
experience of living through it, because it will have a lot of anxiety, but what goes up comes down if they can self-soothe and have support from their parents. So,
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because also not everybody has an anxiety disorder, but if
right.
there is fear and anxiety to the level where it's causing impairment and it's impacting their functioning, then you may want to look at seeing a psychologist, a therapist to get an evaluation and get your child either play therapy if they're 5, like you mentioned, or regular cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, exposure therapy, just depending on what's going on and help them address that. So it could be normalized and it can also be treated. So yeah.
Looping back to the parents disagreeing, which you and I both know is huge in working with parents. One parent said, what if you disagree within the same household? Same kind of principles, but I'll hand that to you to make those points.
Yes, I specialize in that. I love working with these parents. So I think we have to go back to what is your goal for your kid and for your household? Because what I find is oftentimes when parents in the same household disagree about stuff, it's usually really dumb stuff. Many times in their words, it's stuff that really doesn't matter. So or it matters, but the way you're reinforcing it doesn't really matter. So, okay, so you say that you want your kid to go to bed by 8:30 and you want them to go to bed by 9. So, why does it matter? Well, let's talk about it. Well, because they need this many hours of sleep. So, let's talk about that. Like, so then you value good rest so they can function well the next day. Great. So, now let's talk about how much rest your kid really needs and let's come to a compromise. So, I think it's really about them talking about whatever your rules and limits are. First of all, are they realistic? Are they overly rigid or overly too flexible? And what is your end goal here? With this rule and limit that you have, does it get you to the end goal of raising a kid who's resilient and social and well-adjusted and successful? Like, does it get you to that? And if it feels like it's one of those micromanaged things, then it maybe is not really all that important. And so I think it's always going back to like, what is your real goal here? And if you align on the goal, then there's various ways to get to that goal. So then let's bring in some flexibility here so you can both get on the same page or meet the goal in your own unique ways rather than it being a source of conflict.
Right. I know that giving up a little turf to get to the middle, because usually getting to be aligned is so much more important than getting what you want ideally out of your comfort zone and belief system. It's so hard, but I couldn't agree with more. So we're nearing the end, and I'd like you to end on what is the concept that you, or a point that you wish parents understood more about parenting?
Ooh, what do I wish parents understood more about parenting? Well, I think it goes back. I've written a book that is going to be released at the in October of this year, and the title is "Love the Teen You Have." And it was very easy for me to come up with that because I feel like so often we forget to do that. That we get so caught up in the behaviors we want to change and the things that they need to do differently and how we fail and what we need to do differently. And we forget to just love them where they're at, delight in them and enjoy their presence simply because they exist and that they have value simply because they're with us. And so I think that's what I wish more parents just remembered. Like, yeah, we need to fix this thing or we need to address this thing. And then their grades need to come up. And it'd be nice if they kept their room clean. But do you truly just love them where they're at and just delight in them? And
Wonderful.
do they feel that from you? Or do they feel like there's always a lecture and a teachable moment? So I think that's what
Ideal.
I wish more parents knew.
Ideal. Thank you so much for that. Radical acceptance. Loving
Yes.
kindness. It's amazing how much wisdom converges into that concept, right? Ann-Louise, thank you
Mhm.
so much for being with us today. And thank you to our audience. We really appreciate your being with us today and sharing.
Thank you.
And we hope everybody will join us for the next Parent Ed Talk, which is entitled From Chaos to Calm, Compassionate Discipline for Spirited Children, on April 1st with Joe Newman, author and parent coach. So on that note, goodbye.
Bye. Thank
And
you.
thank you again. Take care.